Hi everyone, Nerdy Jane here, and I have fallen down another lore rabbit hole in 76. When I first played 76, I didn't spend a lot of time in Watoga, so I decided to go back and walk through the city a little bit, and holy crap, there's a lot of lore here. What started off as one big video kind of covering all of Watoga has now turned into a series, where I start by covering the city as a whole, that's this video, and then I go into some of the key buildings throughout the city. I'm going to be focusing on the pre-war lore as I find it just more interesting. Yeah, the games are fun and all, but it's a lot of raiders and surviving and people killing each other. Whereas pre-war was a lot of messed up stuff in its own way. So if you like pre-war lore too, then you're in the right spot. Let's take a look at Watoga. So starting with the history of Watoga, it was founded on February 4th, 2042 as the City of the Future. Atomic Mining Services, AMS, financed the whole project to show how a city could be completely automated by robots. I'm also getting a Epcot sort of vibe. If you don't know Epcot, not the current Epcot, I'm talking about what Disney wanted Epcot to be. Go look into it. It's kind of wild what he wanted to do, but anyway. Everything was run by machines, including municipal, civil, and emergency services, teachers, and even personal jobs like playing sports at the Civic Center. Not kidding. These robots were supplied by Robco and General Atomics, so they were Protectrons and Mr. Handys mainly. Hell, even the political structure was run mostly by a computer assistant, though there was a human mayor. But, speaking of, the mayor would have been selected by a city council, which was just a bunch of computers that were integrated into the city's systems. So again, it's all run by computers. The mayor would stay in their role for a random amount of time, but were allowed to make executive orders, any executive order. Some were actually very helpful, but others were not so much. To help the mayor in their duties, since it was usually short-lived, they were supplied with Maya, or Maya. I'm not quite sure how you'd pronounce it. I'm going to pronounce it Maya for the rest, but that's the mayoral artificial intelligence assistant. Honestly, I would have gone for Zax, but I digress. I just like chaos. With unchecked power, this system allowed random people to do a lot of harm, as most people really didn't care about anybody else in the city. Just like everybody else in pre-war America, I think we could have a whole conversation about how little people cared about each other in pre-war America, but that's for a different video. With robots taking care of literally everything in the city, an air of elitism rose. Menial tasks like cooking, cleaning, etc. became beneath people, and since there were very few human jobs in Watoga, only the richest could afford to live here. People had to apply to live there, with managers of corporations like Robco approving applications. I can only imagine the prices of everything here. This kind of elitism actually bred resentment and then discontent, which is the breeding ground for revolution. Or at least someone's attempted revolution. The Free Watoga People's Party was developed by Scott Turner, a Robco developer who was denied living space in Watoga, even though he worked in Watoga, and was facing financial hardships due to the downturn of his hometown. We'll talk about his hometown in its own video. I think it deserves attention as a lot of the surrounding areas around Watoga were kind of becoming desolate. As a way of freeing Watoga, he and a few others started to sabotage different bots around the city, including chef bots who destroyed food to make them inedible, and even the emergency service robots. Okay, I know that he was mad, but like kids live in the city, there's at least a high school, right? And he's tampering with bots that physically heal people. It's just a bad idea on paper. Like, it's not even a good idea in thought. It's a bad idea, just the premise of it. But it gets worse in practice. So on October 22nd, 2077, one day before the bombs dropped, for us lore fans, Scott sets his plans in motion, overriding the emergency service robots, that's medical, fire, police, those essential robots, and he reprogrammed them to cause chaos, which would force the elites to evacuate from Watoga, leaving the city empty for the blue-collared workers to return to their city and take it over. Except, as the mayor initiated the evacuation program, which they absolutely should have, the facial recognition software of the bots, the ones that Scott rewrote to make sure the bots didn't attack the workers that would come flooding back into Watoga once the city was empty? Yeah, it didn't recognize the elites anymore and fired on the people fleeing the city. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of bodies during our tour of Watoga later in this video. But lucky for Scott, and not being legally responsible for any of the deaths he caused, the bombs dropped on October 23rd, and his revolution really didn't matter anyway. The world was over, and on top of that, he killed all sorts of people. Scott did feel bad about it in the end and ended up dying from radiation poisoning from the nuclear fallout. But yeah, dick move, Scott. It's just a dick move. With the basic history of the city covered, let's take a little tour of the city. I walked up and down the streets of Watoga to see how the people would have lived before the revolution and the bombs dropped. A lot of these buildings have a story of their own, so as I said before, I'll be covering them in their own video. So if I don't get to some details, don't worry, I'm going to cover them when I talk about them in their own videos. So true to story, we don't see a ton of bodies around the city, and there's not a lot of cars either. Cars were actually parked in large underground garages that could be accessed at various points throughout the city. People also moved around the city riding the monorail system, which also brought people into the city and let them leave the city via the same track. Starting from the main sign here, we have the Civic Center. A presidential debate was to be held here before the bombs fell, and this being televised would have done wonders for the popularity of the city. This was also where basketball and other sporting events were held, including some more violent demonstrations that I think were actually pre-war. Oh, and you see these lumps in the sides of buildings? Like, if you go into Watoga, you'll see these lumps on the side of the buildings. Those are actually scorch beast nests. That's right, the big bats that fly around the wasteland actually lived in the city, but they probably got annoyed by the robots firing lasers at them all the time. Like, the lasers really wouldn't have been that harmful, but, I mean, constantly being shot at, it's going to take its toll. The transit hub here allowed people to grab the monorail and head into and out of the city. This is where you'll find most of the bodies, as the people that flocked here to try to evacuate were gunned down while they tried to flee from all of the robots. Again, thanks, Scott. The Emergency Services Center here covered all of your emergency needs, like firefighters and medical services. It was very convenient, too. It was located right towards the center of the city, which was great. In the event that you had an emergency and the phone lines were busy, you would have to go visit the building and fill out reports and applications for assistance. The complaints found here are tragically funny. Robot pods littered the sidewalk as you make your way through the city, making sure that there were always support bots on hand to tackle any need the citizens might have. There were a smattering of restaurants, coffee shops, things like that. We do see a fresh soil restaurant, which sounds oh so appetizing. It was probably a farm-to-table restaurant, but the name just doesn't work for me. At the very center of the city is the iconic AMS Tower. Here, the main corporate sponsor of Watoga conducted research on automated mining machines, working closely with the Hornwright Mining Company and Robco. It also housed the pneumatic transfer system, which moved things and people through the tubes around the facility. Some shady stuff happened here, and a lot of people got hurt. There were also 3 main living complexes throughout the city. We have Watoga Estates, Cranberry Heights, and Watoga Towers. All of the buildings were condemned, save for the Watoga Towers, where we can still find a lone Brotherhood of Steel initiate living and protecting the city. Initiate Dodge, aka Timu Solid Snake. From his apartment, we can actually get a glimpse of how people would have lived in Watoga. We can see a living room and a kitchen area and 2 small bedrooms. This was probably a rather expensive unit. We don't get to see into the other 2 complexes and how they lived, but my hunch is Watoga Estates was the ritzy complex, Watoga Towers was like middle of the road, and Cranberry Heights was probably the cheapest option. Though I couldn't find a way to access a unit in Watoga Estates, I did gain access to the roof of one of the complexes and found a pool and a bar set up. So it would make sense that this is where the ultra-rich of Appalachia lived. There was also a shopping center in Watoga, which housed Watoga real estate offices, a mini super duper mart for groceries and other daily needs, and Hubris Comics, along with 2 locally owned shops, Miller Appliances and Stewart's department store. Nothing much to note about these buildings, besides the Brotherhood of Steel used a robot behind the counter at the Super Duper Mart as a trading post, which is still strange to me. The Brotherhood of Steel are so anti-technology, but that's a different story. We're focused on pre-war lore here. Down the street from the shopping center is a Drumlin Diner, which is actually in pretty decent shape. There is one skeleton still left in here enjoying his last meal. He must not have gotten the evacuation order, and the chef bot working here may have put an end to him. That's my theory anyway. I can't be sure. We have the Watoga Amphitheater. It's a pretty basic amphitheater where you'd probably go for live musical performances, things like that. You can get a holotape here If you're looking for a certain holotape, it is part 4 of a 6-part series. Of course, we have Watoga High School, home of the infamous Monster Mash. That is going to get its own video because there is actually quite a bit of lore in this high school, and I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say it was a hellhole before the bombs dropped. And last but certainly not least, we have the Watoga Municipal Center, where the mayor would sit proudly for whatever amount of time they were allowed to be mayor for. Maya is still up here, ready to assist any mayor that walks through the doors. We will do a deep dive into this building and go into the political power struggle and revolution in more detail in a future video as well. So that about wraps up our tour of Watoga, the city of the future. Walking the streets, I tried to imagine what it would be like in its heyday. Shiny buildings, clean streets, friendly Mr. Handies giving you a good day to you as you pass them by. And what's crazy is that it wasn't even the bombs that did everyone in. The bots did it due to reprogramming by a human. It's kind of wild. And here's the kicker. The bots were terrible without Scott's tinkering. We'll get into detail about that, but the bots were bad. Side note, Watoga is actually a real place, but it's nothing like what we see in Fallout 76. Really, the name is the only connection, but I just thought I'd put it in there that there is a Watoga, West Virginia. Anyway, thank you so much if you made it this far. I hope you liked the video. If you want to check out the next one where we go into more detail about some of the buildings around Watoga, don't forget to subscribe if you want to. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone. Aiden was a lawyer and had no military training, so Zax knew he would have no idea how to handle explosives. So, Zax left out some explosives for Aiden to find and gave him the ability to make good on his threats.